It's 12, and we do tend to start our conversations right on time.
Ariane, are we recording?
Yes, I started.
Okay.
Wonderful. All right, so officially welcome. So nice to see many familiar faces and many new faces. Welcome to the International Humanistic Management Association's Intellectual Shaman Discussion Series with Sandra Waddock, and today also joined by Travis Ruddle and Brad Agle on Bridging Divides, Understanding the Trump Phenomenon. I'm Erica Steckler from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and again, a warm welcome to all. The Intellectual Shaman Series is sponsored by the Galligan Chair of Strategy in the Carroll School of Management at Boston College and is hosted by the Gabelli School of Business at Fordham University. The series is also a part of the Working Group on Humanistic Management of the United Nations Principles for Responsible Management Education, or PRIME. And we have many opportunities like this. I'll put some information in the chat along the way. I'd like to quickly turn it over to Michael Pearson just to say a quick hi, and then we'll turn it over to Sandra and our featured speakers today and the conversation to come.
Well, thank you, Erica, and thank you, Sandra, for hosting us today, and thank you, Brad and Travis for being here. Thank you for everybody else to be here. These are important conversations that we thought are important for academics to be involved in, and oftentimes we didn't feel that there was the sufficient space. So we wanted to have that extra space for conversation and engagement. So I thank you all for engaging, and back over to you, Erica or Sandra.
Thanks. I'll pick it up. So I want to welcome Brad and Travis. The Intellectual Shaman series is based on my book by that name, and it's meant to help sort of faculty think about how to do more impactful research. And I just want to say to Travis, you are the first assistant professor we've ever had. So welcome. So Travis Ruddle is an assistant professor at Brigham Young University's Romney Institute of Public Services and Ethics. His research focuses on issues within the public, nonprofit, and for-profit sectors, including citizens' experiences, crises, and scandals, and ethical and moral behaviors in organizations. He's published in several academic journals, including Nonprofit and Voluntary Sector Quarterly, Public Integrity, and the Journal of Contingencies and Crisis Management. He earned his Ph.D. in political science from the University of Oklahoma in 2022 and a Master of Public Administration in 2019. His dissertation was called Citizens and Sectors, an examination of sector performance and blame attribution during times of certainty and uncertainty. Brad Agle, I've known, we were just trying to figure out before you arrived, Brad, probably about 30-something years. He's very active in the SIM division, which I'm also very active in. He's the George Romney Endowed Professor at Brigham Young University's Marriott School of Business, a position he's held since 2009. In this role, he teaches courses on ethics and leadership, drawing on his extensive research in business ethics, stakeholder management, CEO leadership, and the role of religion in business. Brad is a renowned ethics scholar who earned his Ph.D. from the University of Washington in 1993 and has also taught at the University of Pittsburgh. He's widely published in numerous top-tier management journals. He serves as a fellow and chair of BYU's Wheatley Institute Ethics Initiative. He focuses on business ethics, stakeholder relations, CEO leadership, and how religion influences businesses. Now, the reason, I don't know about all of you, but when the election happened, personally, I was absolutely stunned. And I knew from talking to Brad at the Academy last summer that he was finishing up this book. So I went ahead and bought the book, read it, and thought, oh no, we really need to understand this, because it just struck me that I certainly had missed anything about why people might vote the way they did. And then it occurred to me there's probably a lot of other topics that we are also missing. So I thought we'd start this conversation with Brad and Travis sharing with us the research and their findings about this phenomenon that at least I am still struggling to understand. So I'm going to turn it over to Brad and Travis for their input.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. And
Brad,
I also was...
One more thing. If you have questions, please put them into the chat, and Brad and Travis will speak for about 25 or 30 minutes. I'll ask them a couple questions, and then we'll turn it over to people who are in attendance for their questions. Sorry, go ahead,
Great.
Brad.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So, Sandra, I was thinking about the same thing. My first Academy of Management was 89. So I think you were probably there. So we've probably known each other for 35 years.
Wow.
And I'm very appreciative of this invitation to speak to everyone. And it really is an honor to have this invitation from Sandra. I've been a big fan of Sandra's for my whole career, and she does tremendous work. And so I'm just grateful to be with you today. I will tell you that I was working on lots of fun projects 15 months ago that I wanted to continue working on. But I saw, quite frankly, as a business ethics professor, I've been paying attention to Donald Trump long before most people were paying attention to him. And I mean, I was just like, yeah, the guy's kind of a clown. And it's like, yeah. And I was totally shocked that, he won the Republican nomination and won the presidency in 2016. Was horrified by lots of things that happened during his presidency, was very grateful that he got knocked out in 2020, was absolutely horrified by what happened on January 6th. I've never yelled so loudly or so long at my television before the hours of what was happening in Washington, D.C. And then it looked like, he was going away. Yay, hooray. And then 15 months ago, I realized he's not going away. The man might become the president again. And I thought, well, as I will talk about later, for a particular reason, I've got to do something. And so I put on my strategy hat and went, okay, what can you bring to the table? And I was like, okay, well, I know how to do research, and I've got a reputation of research. So let's do some research. And I wanted to understand Trump supporters. What is going on? How could somebody support this person who violates so many of our ethical norms that, I won't go through the litany. The litany, right? So why would people still support him? And the other piece was, I thought, I want to make sure that I'm right. I want to spend time and do research and make sure that the things that I'm thinking are correct. And I want to be challenged on the things that I'm thinking. So that led me to decide to go out and talk to Trump supporters. And I've never done focus groups before. I've done qualitative research. I've done interviews, but I've never done focus groups. I thought, well, let's try it. That's what people do. So, always fun. Try something new in your academic career. So try focus groups. And shortly after I made that decision, we had a department meeting, and we all talked about what we were going to be doing the next year. And I talked about that. And I have this wonderful, young, brilliant colleague named Travis Ruddle, who all of his degrees are in political science, including his Ph.D. And he came and said, hey, can I join that project? And I said, yeah, would love to have you. So that's how it all started. In terms of this project, 15 months ago, we published the book just about 2 weeks before the election, which is about a month and a half later than we would have wanted to. But you're all academics, kind of how that goes. So we're going to just talk about the basics of the book today, and then look forward to your comments and questions. I don't know who's running the.
I've got the slides, Brad, so I'll do my part, and then when we get to yours, you'll just say next slide, and I'll pivot. So
terrific. Thank you, Travis.
Of course.
So let me introduce Travis Ruddle. I mean, Sandra did it, but my wonderful colleague Travis Ruddle.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad, very, very much. Appreciate being with everyone today. And as Brad was basically saying, is I am kind of the political scientist in the room. But even though a great focus on the public management, public service aspect of things. And I care a lot about what citizens are thinking and as their role of voters in the good, bad, and ugly situations. If we start at the very top and you think about historically and culturally, people are very fragile. They can move and pivot on their beliefs. Some are a little more stalwart, resolute, and strong. But there's the savior. There is the strongman. There is someone to try and fix those issues, and especially when there's people want the black and white rather than the gray in a lot that's going on. And I have to start out in a way talking about all the institutional distrust, whether it has to do with FBI and IRS or in politicians and business. A lot of people suffer from great distrust. And for some reasons, for some aspects and elements, it's true, it's valid, it's real, and we can't invalidate that and we can't vilify that. It's how people get to that determination that's kind of the struggle. So I have to start with Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt's a phenomenal political philosopher or political theorist. She would not consider herself to be a philosopher. But she says in this, it is this fragility that makes deception so easy up to a point and so tempting. It never comes into conflict with reason, because things could indeed have been as the liar maintains they were. Lies are often the much more plausible, more appealing to reason than reality, since the liar is the great advantage of knowing beforehand what the audience wishes or expects to hear. He has prepared his story for public consumption with a careful eye to making it credible, whereas reality has the disconcerting habit of confronting us with the unexpected, for which we were not prepared. And that's kind of a really important pivot point to start with, whether that's in Nazi Germany, whether that is in other times in which we've seen strongman come to power in authoritarian eras. And that's the cultural, the feeling, the aura of today is so much distrust and all of the lies and all of the deception, disinformation, misinformation. It's a no wonder people struggle to understand what's going on. In facts, they're very difficult. So it starts out, the next quote is, it's if you were to kind of focus more on Trump, if you see all the books at Barnes & Noble or other independent bookstores, you'd talk a lot about Trump. We focus on Trump supporters, and in a non-vilifying way, in a very humane way, to recognize, these are people. And there is real valid reasons to vote for Trump because of the economic issues or inflation or immigration. And there can't be that vilification, but we need to understand this understanding. And Hannah Arendt says in Origins of Totalitarianism quite well, the ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not a convinced Nazi or convinced communist. This could be interchanged today with, a convinced Republican or a convinced Democrat, because it's not just a one-sided issue of allegiance, but it's really the people who struggle the distinction between fact and fiction, or the reality of their experience, the distinction between true and false. They no longer exist. It is very complicated. It is very difficult to get through. So we did this in a culture of great disinformation, a culture of great misinformation. We did this to try and understand our fellow neighbors, our fellow church members, our fellow citizens in a very humane way of actually listening with people for an hour and a half in these focus groups in South Carolina and Utah, Arizona, and in my home state of Oklahoma. And in this hour and 30 minutes, what we're trying to do is, it is almost all open in terms in the very beginning of really just trying to listen to people, their concerns about economy, the inflation, the defense, various issues. But then what we want to do early on is, as we're doing this very deep listening session and really recognizing and finding the real warmth that people actually have, and sometimes it gets a little bit more heated at times, but by and large, yet really well. We wanted to see what people did with facts. And with Trump supporters, facts, kind of as John Adams said, are very stubborn things. And so we asked them with some triangulated sources, basically on some certain facts on our graduate students as well as ourselves. We found various statements on the 2020 election or on some of the moral failings and moral issues. And we wanted to see how people saw how valid they were or how much they knew about things. On top of all the conversations that were had. So it's almost this individual survey as well as the collective survey. And these survey questions had, of course, the usual demographics and things like that nature. We had a pretty good sample of what we consider to be Trump's population, essentially. even though his is expanded, the map expanded quite a bit this last go around, it was generally pretty much close to how that would look. And so in order to get people in there for an hour and a half, you have to do this $30 gift card and also doing a snowball sampling method to get people, because the advertisements weren't there. They needed trust. They needed an expectation that, this isn't going to be just a trap, or this wasn't going to be something in that way. And so essentially I know this is really small, but the point is all of the coding that went into this to truly do the kind of a very inductive approach of listening and then making these connections to theories such as moral disengagement that we could see, or authoritarianism, cult-like behavior, various things that we'll kind of discuss, some a little bit deeper than others today. But our students, a group of 3 students, as well as myself, went into deep coding for many months, probably deep 4 months for sure, and found basically around 4,000 some individual coded segments and these quotes that really are quite powerful. And I'll kind of show a few of those today. Kind of one of these it's really interesting is in the conversations with Trump supporters and trying to listen, there's this immediate sense of, I know. A lot of people says, I know this, or I feel this. And there was just this strong confidence about things, even if they were distorted facts, even if they were disinformation. There's just this consistent, immediate, and resolute feeling of, I know this is the case. But there are some times in which there's kind of the pivot at that. But here's just a little grouping of quotes that are just, they're on first face, they connect to theory. But the other thing it speaks to are some real concerns that people have. And so we want to validate it, but also explain it. So someone in Washington, Utah, kind of a little smaller part outside of St. George, Utah, in southern part, says, I like the fact that he's a bully. And you're going and trying to connect that to some of his behaviors, and also connect to how does a woman identify that that's okay, like a bully is all right. And it's this idea that America's seen as weak right now. And then you see the one that's just one of the most fascinating ones. I say it over and over and over again because it's just really one of the most fascinating is, I'm unimpressed with smart people. And immediately it pops into anti-intelligence, anti-intellectuals, the bureaucracy, that these are people that are not smart deep down, or they're actually identify as smart, but they're not deemed as so. Or in, evangelical circles with Oklahoma, we see this idea of, well, Trump's a baby Christian. And it took about 5-minute conversation on that one to try and understand, what does that mean? And it's essentially at its root, the born again experience. But also deep in that same conversation was a very, very rich anti-Catholic view. And it was just kind of shocking to hear. So Biden didn't get the same, kind of the same sentiment. And also in Provo, the conversation is, well, I'm not voting for a preacher. And that connects a lot to, as we've talked a little bit, these are some of the contents in the book of moral rationalization that Brad's, the expert on, that he's going to go into deep detail on. Or we see tribalism, people going and utilizing motivated reasoning. And then the idea of victimhood, that they feel there's this issues of being attacked from the deep state, that Trump is also under attack, or Republicans are. And amongst other types of piece of the chapter in terming cult-like behavior, authoritarianism. And then we have basically in the last couple chapters of the book, a very practical way of evaluating fact and fiction in this era of great disinformation and misinformation, and how we can kind of avoid and overcome this idea of the totality of allegiance, which is what in it, the finding is, as you become allegiant to someone and your own identity erodes, your own identity becomes away from this new identity, that all things that you once had really strongly believed in actually can be kind of eroded and evaporated. And unwitting or witting, but usually unwittingly, that allegiance is in total, that facts are no longer the same way. There is this deep, deep disregard or a deep lack of critical thinking. And this is not just a Republican issue. It's not just a Trump supporter issue. I'll make very, very clear that this is an allegiance that is unique to human condition. But as Immanuel Kant kind of says it best, is we want people to have the courage to use your own understanding. And that at the very root, from the beginning, as they started, to now, is kind of what we really want to instill in our students. We instill in our fellow, family members as well as friends, that we're actually using that God-given understanding and ability to do so. So I'm going to turn the time over to Brad. Brad's going to give a little bit of his his story and background, which is kind of similar to mine, going to Germany and study abroad and really understanding Buchenwald as a concentration camp. And Brad's different. So I'm going to turn time over to Brad to talk about his story, as well as going to deep detail about kind of moral rationalization.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. So as I mentioned, I was interested in two things. I was interested in trying to understand my friends and neighbors and even some relatives who, were Trump supporters, and also to see if I was right or wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Two things I'll report from after the research. Number one, I wasn't wrong. People truly were believing facts that just are not facts, and the craziness that I saw is indeed crazy. So there was that, and then the second one, I'm really grateful that I spent the time with these Trump supporters. Hillary Clinton, of course, got a lot of grief for talking about the basket of deplorables. And, were there some deplorables in our sample? Yeah, sure. But I don't think at a larger rate than in the general population or among Biden or Harris supporters. Most of them were really good human beings with beliefs in the kinds of stuff that we believe in. Obviously, some political difference, but in general, these are good people. So how do these good people, how do they end up supporting someone like Trump? And it takes me back to actually the reason 15 months ago I felt like I really had to do something. And it goes back to October of 1980. So before many of you were born. In October of 1980, I showed up as a 19-year-old missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Munich, Germany. And once a week, missionaries get a chance to, it's called Preparation Day. You go buy your groceries, you go, wash your clothes. And if you get a few hours, you also maybe do some tourism stuff. And one of the first weeks I was there, I went and visited Dachau. As most anyone, I learned about the Holocaust in high school, etc., but it did not prepare me for actually going to Dachau. One of the most meaningful and disturbing experiences of my life. And I tell people, as I look back on my life, that's the day I became a serious social scientist, because I just couldn't believe. I mean, just being there, how in the world could people get to the point where they would actually treat their fellow human beings like that? So, it kind of fits with the IHMA, right? Humanistic. It's like, man, that is the exact opposite of what it means to be a humanistic organization, individual, to care about the rights of other people and to love other people. That was the exact opposite. And so I remember it was about a 2-hour train ride back to Landshut, which is the city I was serving in. And I just, for 2 hours, I don't think I talked to more missionaries are always in pairs. I don't think I talked to my companion for 2 hours. I was just in my head going, how does this happen? And so as I look back, why did I end up getting a Ph.D. in management? And particularly, why did I keep focusing on ethics when I also had strategy and other interest in regulation? And I take it all back to this. I'm still, for the last, 44 years, trying to understand how in the world something like this could happen. And so last August, I said, I've got to do something about this. So that's where it came from. The first thing we did is we went up to, we were trying to hit the early primary states because of how long it takes to get approval from universities to do human subjects research. We were a little bit late with that, but we did go up to New Hampshire and we went to South Carolina, and there we went. We actually couldn't get people to do a focus group because the day we were trying to do it, Trump happened to be in New Hampshire where we were. And so we went, well, we'll go where the people are. So we went to a Trump rally, talked to a lot of people. That was very enlightening. Next slide. And this was written by Nicole Russell, who this actually article is talking about why people should vote for Trump, in spite of the fact that she said Trump is a childish, narcissistic buffoon who wants power more than he loves his country. He's a dishonest misogynist who happily defies political norms. He's a charlatan who has captured a sect of Republicans in a way that's alarming. He can't speak without rambling about nonsense. He refuses to seek advice, admit wrongdoing, or work to improve himself. And understand, this is in an article where Nicole is explaining why people will vote for Trump. So let's dive in and talk about what some of these Trump supporters told us, or who they are. So who they are, not necessarily a basket of deplorables. We had a 70-year-old man who spent his time taking care of his ailing wife and 2 grandchildren, very selfless. We had a really highly principled law enforcement leader who was dedicated to making policing as effective and as fair as possible. We had a nurse who was completely dedicated to her patients. We had various local public servants who'd been volunteering for decades. So we had, in general, a really good group of people. Next. But they were also a group of people who were frustrated. They said, we had peace when Trump was president. The southern border was in better shape. The economy was doing better. Inflation was lower. And, why should I have to pay off other people's student loans? And one person said, we're all under the impression that the game is fixed. And he meant fixed against those of us who were sitting in that focus group. So we could argue about, whether these things are true, but that's what they were feeling. So now let me get into moral rationalization. This is really a detail. And I should say, one of the things we found is looking at the literature. Obviously, lots of social scientists tried to understand what happened in the 30s and 40s in Germany and Italy, et cetera. And quite frankly, we just validated a lot of that. In fact, one of the things I said early on is this: so wouldn't it be interesting if we had some social scientists who were talking to Adolf Hitler supporters, in 1932 to get their sense. And we did that with Trump supporters. And what we found is a lot of what social scientists have found from looking at the Nazi phenomenon and what happened in Italy, we found the same kind of things. So I'm diving into moral rationalization. So there are 13 ways that people morally rationalize. There are probably more than that, but that's the model I've kind of developed from other models of other people who've talked about moral disengagement and ethical neutralization, et cetera. We just referred to that as moral rationalization. There's obviously big literatures on all of that. So here's some use of euphemisms. This is what I found really interesting, and it really frustrated me because I don't know how many people were talking about Trump's style, his personality. And I'm like, personality, that's what, are you an introvert, you an extrovert? It's not, do you rape women and do you, steal from people, etc. For me, it's like, that's not personality, that's character. So why did so many people use the word personality? Because personality generally is morally neutral in general. Character has a lot of moral content to it. So if you actually say, I don't like Trump's personality, but I'm still voting for him, it doesn't say anything necessarily about your character. If, on the other hand, you say, I don't like his character, but I'm still voting for him, now all of a sudden that says something about you. And so people use euphemisms, right? They use personality instead of character. we had some of our people say womanizer as opposed to rapist or sexual predator. It's like, one has some volunteer. We don't necessarily love a womanizer, but at least to some degree, we say that's, there's free will in there, but not rapist or sexual predator. So we saw a lot of this claims of normalcy. You've probably already read the quotes, right? We all hate. I just think they're all crazy. So then it's just like, well, he's a normal politician. Next. Appeal to higher loyalties. This actually, I think I'm going to go ahead and skip this one. Okay, so then we have the condemner, right? That's when someone says, "Hey, you're bad," then you say, "Oh, look about you. You're the bad person." And it's interesting that this whole idea of the Trump derangement syndrome came about. It's like, oh, if you think Trump is a terrible person, you must be deranged. Your psychological, self must be off. And so that's a way, if you say, Trump did this thing, instead of someone having to defend why they support Trump, all they have to do is say, oh, you have Trump derangement syndrome. So they condemn you. They don't have to come up with any logical arguments. All they have to do is say you're a terrible person. And it's interesting the way they did that. They said, oh, you must have a mental disorder. You must have Trump derangement syndrome. So, from a strategic perspective, it was incredibly effective, unfortunately. Okay, next. We saw literature from, what con men do and cult-like behavior. He's a great Christian, right? He had all the Christian leaders come in and pray with him. And the next one I love, right? He never took a salary. So if we think about con men, what do con men do? Con men get you to look over here at this shiny object, and then meanwhile they're picking your pocket. And that's exactly what's going on. You got all these Trump supporters saying, oh my gosh, he never took a salary, gave the money back. Meanwhile, he's stealing millions from the American people by having anybody who wants to have influence stay in Trump hotels and, his Secret Service details stay in. So it's estimated that they got $12 million during that time while they supposedly were saving, 400,000 a year. So 1.6 million. Oh, he saved. Meanwhile, he's stealing 12 million from us. So con men, cult-like behavior. We saw those phenomena. Okay, next. This I'm not going to read this, but this was from a local editorial, and I just couldn't help but laugh because I was like, talk about being conned. I mean, this is somebody that Trump supported for the U.S. Senate in Utah, and he wrote this editorial. And he's like, "Oh, they're so nice to me. So every time I see Trump, he asks how my family is, etc." I'm like, so in other words, you just forget about all the objective negative things about Trump, and he was nice to me. It's like, Utah actually has a reputation for a lot of fraud and people being taken by fraud. And I'm like, well, there's a perfect example for me to show in class of, why people fall victim to fraud. Okay, next.
That's it.
I think that's time for us to now take your questions. So, Sandra, if you want to lead out. You're on mute, Sandra.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brad and Travis. That was great. It surely provides some understanding of some of the dynamics. I remember, Brad, your post on Facebook the day before the election, and you seemed quite disheartened and discouraged. And I just want to know the kind of toll that doing this kind of work took on you. From a personal perspective, because it's huge courage to have done it.
It took it was a very high price. I knew it would be a high price, and it was even a higher price than I thought. This probably, if you look at my life objectively, you would say, oh gosh, Brad's got as good a life as you can have. Right? I mean, I'm a chaired professor, tenured at a great university. my wife loves me. I've got 4 healthy kids, 10 grandkids. My number 10 grandchild was born this year. Life is great. This was tough. It was tough to spend a lot of time watching what Trump was doing. You know, my wife is like, "What are you doing? Always watching, you know, the different news channels." Because I felt like I really needed to take a deep dive and really try to understand what was going on. It was disheartening. It was, I'll be blunt in saying it was disheartening in general. It was even harder seeing my co-religionists and their perspectives. I think one of the things, Sandra, one of the things I wrote is that it's really hard to see people who I thought were fellow followers of Jesus of Nazareth and how they could possibly think the things that they do and how they could be saying the things that they do. I'm like, did these people, did they never read the Bible? Did they never go to church? Because what they're saying and what they're doing has no recognition to anybody who actually has read the Bible. And so that was really hard. So my wife will tell you she's really happy that I'm done with this. And she's got a happier person back in her life. But it took a tremendous emotional toll.
Yeah, and Travis, same question for you. Did it take a similar toll on you, or because of your political science background, did you have more strength in terms of this?
I will say I was very similar to Brad early on in January 6th and seeing a lot of the institutional efforts just completely, the derangement in of its own self of those norms being breached so significantly. That took a toll. And then as I learned to kind of mute some things and honestly just try and not bury my head in the sand, but I just learned that there were more important things that mattered, that where I lifted and where I stood, it mattered. So it affected me earlier and into this phase. I do think a little of my political science background helped in a sense of trying to put some of the just putting forward pure curiosity and not trying to go into judgment mode. And a lot of when I went to Oklahoma, going back home and meeting with some people who I'd happened to have known, I got to really recognize and remember how good they are. And as I've been talking on the radios or on some podcasts and trying to get this try to put it in a concise way, but also using my intellectual hat as much as possible and not the partisan hat, I'm learning that that's a really solid truth. And I've got a pretty good conscience, to be able to handle it. But yeah, no, it was an effect for sure. And I think it's a good thing that it affected us in a way that it would be bad if it didn't. And it was, not emotional. But yeah, it absolutely affected.
Thanks, Travis. I'll ask one more question, sort of the two of you. Like I said to Brad, it takes courage to have done this work. And Brad, you're a senior scholar, with an already built reputation. And even then it becomes really hard to take this kind of risk. And Travis, as a more junior level person, I'm curious how you found the courage to undertake this. So Brad, if you could answer, and then Travis.
Sure. For me, it really was a situation where I didn't feel like I had a lot of choice. I'm a religious person. I somehow felt like I was put in this position, that I had those early experiences in Germany, that I'd been thinking about this. And it felt like whether you refer to it as a spiritual duty or a moral duty, I felt like I had a duty to do something. And so I had a lot of, obviously, family, friends saying, yeah, you shouldn't do this. There's no positive in this for you. And it's going to be hard, and you're going to, make friends unhappy, etc. But really, I just really felt morally responsible to do something. And it's interesting because going into it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I know what happened to people who went up against power, and people go up against power oftentimes pay a high price for it, and that may still happen to me. I don't know. I totally, Travis and I are definitely going to get audited this year, right? I mean, the IRS. I'm sure that the Trump administration has, who are all the people who wrote books against, Trump, et cetera, and the IRS, and who knows whatever government agencies are coming after me. Fortunately, I can sleep at night because I haven't done anything wrong. I've been very conservative and generous in paying my taxes and other kinds of things. So I don't have any skeletons they can find. So that actually made it easier to be courageous.
I mean, it just strikes me that stepping out into any unknown territory, or first of all, it's hard to get papers published or books or whatever. So Travis, can you respond? And then we'll turn it over. I'm going to turn it over to Ravi.
Yeah, sure. So I definitely did not have to do this, and this was going off the beaten path, not only for tenure track, but I mean, I hope that there would be some academic articles, which there will be. Hopefully, they'll land. But it goes down to, as a little boy, if you remember a little video of Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket saying, talking about a conscience. And I don't know. I remember that over and over again. I remember of. I just need to feel good and confident I did what I could, that I couldn't turn the loudspeaker up at the Capitol and get anywhere. I couldn't get anywhere, just going and bashing people or just doing a blog. I needed to get the word out for myself to just understand it better. The same goes for Brad, as well as I just felt there was that duty, a real duty that I can lift where I stand on this, and then I'll let other people handle it from a different level. But I think there was a gap that was there to understand supporters and not just be another hit piece or another pro-Trump book or anti-Trump book. And let's talk about our fellow neighbors. And then, because I think this will help. It'll help us at our dinner tables. It'll help us at our PTA meetings or our city council meetings if we can just get to that level.
Thanks, Travis. So Ravi, do you want to ask your question? Are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here. My video is not working, but I put my question in the chat. If you can both read that, that would be good. But I really see this as the battle between economics and ethics, because I have a lot of friends who are very rich, and they're one-issue people, tax savings, period. And as far as helping others, they do a lot of charitable work. They don't trust in the government, and they value the Republican principles, small government, low taxes, and those kinds of things. So it's just one issue. So I see this whole battle as economics versus morality. But I put my question in the chat. Maybe you can answer.
Let me read the question. How do perceived economic benefits and moral compromises interact in the decision-making process of voters who support unethical politicians? Why don't we stop right there and let either one of you or both of you respond?
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, there was also a question about bias. It was interesting. So you're talking to a lifelong conservative, moderate Republican. Okay, so I'm not coming from this from a left side of politics. I'm actually coming more from the right or the center. And in terms of this particular question, there's no question. There are people who vote purely on economic reasons and saw that as the best choice to vote for Trump. And that's where the moral disengagement comes in, because they also see themselves, at least most of the ones we talk to, they see themselves as ethical people. So they didn't see it as, oh, I'm throwing away morality for my self-interest. Instead, they had to convince themselves, and thus the moral disengagement quotes that I was using, those are the kinds of things that they were doing, because moral disengagement is basically an attempt to try to feel ethical about yourself while you're doing unethical things. And so we did see a lot of that moral disengagement going on.
Yeah.
Travis,
you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I was discussing with this someone a few days ago, and there are those people who are willing to say, I'm just checking a box in the ballot box, or I'm just filling in a circle. And to them, it's not as deep, it's not as personal, it's not as big of an issue on the moral failings or some of that. It's the bread and butter issues, the kitchen table issues. And then they just pull off. They get away from politics for the most part. They don't want to touch it. They did their due diligence in doing it. And that economic driver, the own personal benefit into their family too. It's not just individual, it's the family. It's just the Trump. It is the total Trump for people. And the other things are just, not that they don't matter, because you could see the moments in focus groups where you saw an uncomfortability, especially on the moral issues. You could see areas where they began to really kind of question, and like the light bulb came on of critical thinking. But the extent to which it matters is much less than the economic factors. So they're just rationalize their way through it. Yeah. It's understandable. What I don't want to say is it's not understandable. I get that, especially at lower income levels, middle income, or not feeling like you get by. The other part of it is me a little more jaded, is I see everybody driving Teslas and Rivians and very fancy vehicles and cars and homes, and you're going, is it really that bad? So you're trying to like connect the dots, but you still want to,
yeah,
put your own self, don't put the blinder up and not try and understand it.
Thanks. Erica, you want to ask your question?
Sure. I mean, I'm struggling with the election results, and also from, for me, the kind of benefit of living in a very blue state. So it sort of is a little bit even more shocking, but at least there's community here for me. But I find myself thinking and talking in very blunt we them terms, and I know that's not helpful. So I'm just wondering, from your research, if you have insights about how to bridge.
Yeah, so I love that question. And as I've been going on like conservative airways and talking and noticing the way, and I'm not doing it in an kind of unfiltered, or I'm doing it in a very appropriate, or I feel it's a comfortable sense. I feel like it's a little bit of a guard, but at the same time, I'm saying truth to power. And as I go in and talk to people to try and really explain this issue, I get away from the they and them as much as possible. And I try and individualize each human being that I met, or an individual thought. It's not a collectivism. Yes, the Trump supporters use this. That is absolutely right. But we all use these types of defenses and various types of things. And so if you could pull back and try the best. I used to do the we, they, them, and I still do. It's not that I can't take that hat off or use it, but I'm finding if I remember where people are as I remember them, or if I remember people in terms of their caring about their kids and their safety, or about their own matters, and I show up at city council meetings, with my students. Yeah, it might get a little heated, but someone's got some sort of concerns, and their view of vocalizing or their way of understanding it is just different. And I can't vilify that necessarily the process unless they're just completely, purely not only unwitting, but unwilling to try things. But deep down, people are my neighbor, my fellow ward member, church member, and I have my own issues. So it's kind of like this kind of a gut check on myself to pull back and be really careful. It's the judgment's quick. It's easy to do. That's what our brains want to do. We want to get into the bad and the ugly first, or the negative. But I'm trying to remember, these are people trying to get by. These are people who are overwhelmed with information and overwhelmed with issues. Kind of as I saw one of the questions about the hierarchy of needs, is they're just trying to get by. And the other things, the politics really doesn't matter to 90% of Americans. And we're thinking of it a little bit differently as intellectuals. But I love that question.
So in the interest of time, I want to leave the last 5 minutes for you to answer the question, what do we do about it? But Isabel and then Marty, who have your hand up. Isabel, do you have one question? Short, please. You're muted, still muted.
Oh, thank you. I forgot, I wrote it so long time ago. Why don't you take someone and I go back to my question?
Okay,
Sorry.
Jessica, then Marty. You still here, Jessica? Here you are. You're muted. You have to unmute. You're still muted. There you go.
I'm on my cell phone, so I can't look at the video and the chat at the same time. Does someone mind reading? That's on
Yeah, on a human level, based on the research you've done, how can each of us show up on a daily basis and help rebuild our connection between truth and feeling? For example, is there work for us to do? Are we focusing too much on fact and losing touch with feeling? And I guess that was part of my question, my initial thought when we organized this. So, Brad or Travis? Try to keep it a little bit short.
Yeah. One thing I would say is I'd encourage you to go watch a interview with Michael Sandel. He talks about this issue and I really like it. Now go ahead and buy the book and read that too. Thank you. But meanwhile, I really enjoyed and I thought Michael had some nice insights. I think as we study the social science and we sort of understand, it actually gives us much more empathy for those who think differently than us. And one of the things that the social science is pretty clear on is that we tend not to like people who we don't know. Whereas if we actually know people or groups of people, we like them a lot better. And I'm forgetting the guy who wrote the book. Who is the lawyer who Just Mercy? There's the film about it in the movie, right? And he says you have got
Bryan Stevenson.
Yes, Bryan Stevenson. So you've got to come together. You've got to come together. So, to Erica, it's like you've got to talk to those people. You've got to get to know them. And we have sort of become bifurcated in our society. So the more that we can come together and learn about each other, the better off we're going to be.
And it's uncomfortable. I mean, our focus groups sometimes are uncomfortable, but in the end, after it all, no one ever complained. No one ever said, oh, it was a trap or it was a bad thing. And, we're better from having that, even though some of it was kind of, radical at times or issues. But it's like Brad and I are better for having those difficult, crucial conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. Marty, quick question, please.
Yeah, as a lifelong Democrat, after going through the shock, I live in Canada now because I left the United States because of the Reagan administration and being under his governorship in California for 8 years. So he's a much better character than we have in your presidency down below here. I heard this analyst say this, see if this fits with your focus groups. There were 3 things that he thought were the reason why Trump won, and he only won by about 1.8 million votes. So we can see this black and white where there are still a lot of people that voted for the Democrats. And that was one, he said that there's always the incumbent blame. And so people vote for the other candidate for a million of reasons, which has to do, I just want change. The second one, he said, was that there were Democrats in the Congress and in governorships that won in states that Kamala and Walz lost. So he said that this was a campaign because he only had 3.5 months to run it, that they didn't have the entire kind of windswell that Trump had for 4 years, starting with that the election had been fraudulent. He says, nobody ever wins an election with such a short time. And the third thing is, he says, the Democratic Party has become more elitist and is now seen as part of the establishment, and it's lost touch with the average working person. Those were the 3 things that he said. Would that be confirmed by any of your focus group discussion?
As you answer this, maybe also help us figure out what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, so the elitist part for sure. That was that I'm unimpressed with smart people. That's clear, whether it's professors or something like that. Some would say something, I'm really worried about what you're teaching at this institution. And so what it takes is for us to take, I'm from rural Oklahoma. I'm able to go and have conversations in cowboy boots. I'm able to actually talk to people who might vote differently than I might do. And I think that's the part, is to say, hey, I'm not that elitist. I have been up late at night doing a lot of things, pulling cabs in the middle of the night when it's freezing conditions. I'm with you. Okay, I'm not an elitist. I think that's a piece of it. Brad, you want to speak maybe to a couple other things?
Well, I'm trying to remember what they were, but I agree with the first one. The second one, agree, not quite as strongly. And the third one, definitely, we definitely saw those things. In terms of Sandra's question of how do we move forward, we have got to, and I'll go back to the same thing. We've got to get to know the other people. There's some really good books out there about how people have basically been forgotten by the elites. There's one about white rural outrage. And as I read that, so I'd encourage us to read some of those books to try to understand the other side, because they truly are. As you talk to people and you go, okay, yeah, I can understand that. I don't necessarily agree or weight it the same that you do, but I can understand that. And I think one of the things that we got to learn in politics is you got to get over 50%, and so you've got to learn who those other folks are, because as was stated, it wasn't by Marty. It wasn't a big victory. It was a couple million votes.
Thanks. Anything else we can do, or is there anyone else who wants to raise their hand and have a very quick question? We have 3 minutes left. And Brad, there's a couple of requests for the books and the video that you mentioned.
If we get this chat record and everything, then we can try and get the information out back to everybody, and that can be sent out if that works.
Yeah, Ariane, I think we can get the chat, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be happy to follow up.
Yeah. There's a lot of great comments in the chat too.
Yeah.
Anna, do you want to ask your question? ONNA, Anna?
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering because, sorry, by the way, it's already dark here. But you talked a lot about your intent of curiosity over judgment. And I wondered, when you are writing and analyzing the data, it's really a trap. And I think for all of us to still, even saying moral disengagement, there is a bit of a judgmental character in it. So how do you balance this, and how far do you go about remaining unjudgmental, and are you happy with the results? How you balance this judgment and curiosity?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and I think one of the ways you do it is by having co-author. Because if I hadn't had a co-author, this would have been much more judgmental than it was. So I'm actually grateful for Travis, because he was more merciful. And I think because of that, it's a better book. And it's a difficult thing, but I think one of the things that brings us satisfaction is that people that we have a lot of respect for, who have read the book, have come away saying basically, while it hits hard in some ways, it really is fair to the people who supported Trump, and they don't feel as offended as obviously you could offend them. And again, I give a lot of kudos to Travis for making sure that we were fair to those individuals.
So I just want to say thank you to Brad and Travis for writing this book in the first place and doing this really difficult piece of research, and then being willing to come and share it with us today. And there will be this session has been recorded, and both the chat and the recording will be released to anybody who signed up afterwards, in case you want to look at it in the future. And again, just thank you so much to both Brad and Travis for doing this work.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Sandra.
There's all kinds of kudos going on in the chat, just so you know. So,
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
we will respond to the chat. So thanks so very much. Have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful holiday season, whatever that means for you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.